And thank you and welcome to our October in-service. Today we have the pleasure of having Ms. Terry Linder, who is the Executive Director of Communities and Schools of the Midlands. And Ms. Linder is going to be here to discuss with what her organization does for the children that we have in foster care. Ms. Linder, all yours.
Okay. I brought a PowerPoint, and so if you want to kind of maneuver so that you can see it, we're down here in this corner. The mission of Communities and Schools has changed. Some of you who have been in the Columbia area for a long time remember the old Cities and Schools, and we, as everything else I read in today's paper, Belks has a new logo and new color scheme, and as everybody else is changing, we're changing. But our mission is to surround students, all students who have a need, with a community of support. For those of you who remember the old Cities and Schools, we actually ran schools. Now we work within schools. Our goal is to empower them to stay in school and to be successful in life. And so everything we do is attached to that mission. We have some guiding principles. One is personalism. We believe that it's very important to have a one-on-one relationship with young people, promoting individual achievement, but also individual responsibility. And we, as the adults working one-on-one with the students, try to model that individual responsibility. Accountability. We create safe, supervised, healthy, accountable environment, so that the resources that we bring, the partners that we bring, the services that we bring not only meet individual needs, but they're safe. Every volunteer who is connected to a student, to a school, through Communities and Schools, receives an extensive background check just to make sure that we are protecting all of the students that we work with. The other thing in accountability is our national office has created what they call the Total Quality System, and they have created standards, business standards, program standards, and you hear lots of negative things about South Carolina. Well, our local affiliate was one of the first two in the whole country to receive national accreditation. Part of being accountable not only to our students, but accountable to our volunteers, accountable to our donors. We also don't try to do it all ourselves. We know that coordination is extremely important. So we work with the whole community, and we serve as a resource broker and a program facilitator. We believe that there are 5 elements that all children need so that they will have a reason for not giving up on themselves. We call this the 5 basics. A personal one-on-one relationship with an adult who cares. In many instances, you are the adult who cares. A safe place to learn and grow. A marketable skill they can use when they graduate. Oftentimes students don't see the relationship between what they're studying in school and the real world, and so one of the things we try to do is bring resources in that help them understand. The reason we're looking at the chemical composition of something is because if we do water testing, if we work with SCE&G to do water testing at the dam to make sure that we're all having healthy water, you need to be able to do those kinds of things. You need to be able to do math so that you can balance a checkbook. A chance to give back to their communities and peers. We partner with lots of other organizations, one of which is City Year. City Year is an AmeriCorps program whose goal is service, and it also is working with dropout prevention. We do things like in one of our schools, it is our group of CIS students who's responsible for taking care of all the plants. Last week they learned that plants need to have a place for the water to go so that they don't get waterlogged, and so they learned how to use a drill and drill holes in the bottoms of the pots so that the water would have some place to go, and so now that's their responsibility for taking care of all the plants in the school. And a healthy start. Communities in Schools is not just another school program. We're not something that comes into a school and then leaves. We really try to enter a school where we know that we can be sustainable. We aren't focused only on at-risk youth, because the reality is any child could be at risk. Even children from wealthy families or two-parent families can be at risk. We're not a social agency. There are lots of social agencies in the community. We work with the social agencies. We're not a social agency. We're not a partisan program. We're not a Republican program or a Democratic program. We're just a program that's here for the students. We're not a charity. It's not a good thing that we're doing, but it's the right thing to do, because every child deserves the opportunity to reach their fullest potential. So what is Communities in Schools? It's a process for the effective and coordinated brokering of existing community services through the schools. And what that means is we look at what the needs are, what's in the community already that we can connect to the school, and we work within schools. So it's not something that you can call Communities in Schools, you have this student. We are in specific schools. It's a process for cutting across institutional lines to provide comprehensive services and community support for children and families in need. So if a child comes to us, if they're referred to us from a guidance counselor, a social worker, or a teacher, or they self-refer themselves, and they have some issues, they need some help with math, but at the same time their parent has been laid off and they have no place to live, or they're hungry, we will look at what's in the existing community resources that are out there and try to pull it all together to help that student. It's a process for systemic change. I told my board and I've told the staff, our ultimate goal is to put ourselves out of business. When there is someone whose job it is to know the community and to be able to connect the community with needs of the students, then we have a change, and there really isn't going to be a need for Communities in Schools anymore, because it will be a part of the system. Just like teachers are a part of the system, and in some schools social workers are. Communities in Schools, the philosophy and what we do, bringing the community in the school, will be a part of what happens in the school. We have in South Carolina two what they call inside-out schools that bring the community into the school. So they may run health clinics. The library has an outside entrance so people in the community can use the library. They may do the flu shots. They have social services there. They have housing programs there, and so it's really the school becomes the center of the community. So there's two pilots in South Carolina. This is not actually through Communities in Schools, although it's something we would partner with, and we're looking at doing one here. It's actually through the State Department of Education. But that's an example of system change, because as that spreads, then you've got the community right there. What's one of the biggest issues that we have in our community right now for parents and children and getting folks where they need to be? Transportation. That's exactly right. When it's right there at the schools and we get to a system change where the school buses, the parents can come in on the school buses, we'll have a system change that every child can get what they need. We are the largest stay-in-school network. There are 192 local affiliates all over the country. In 27 states and the District of Columbia, there are nearly 2 million students who attend schools where CIS has a presence, and they have access to CIS services, and about 980,000 are directly served by CIS. We are the nation's leading community-based organization helping kids succeed in school and prepare for life. And we work in all types. Our model works in rural communities, urban communities, and suburban communities. And rather than listen to me talk, I thought it would be, if we can make this work, I have a video on the history of Communities in Schools. Uh-oh. That is not a good thing. We got it to work earlier today.
How can children concentrate on their education futures if they're hungry,
All right, so
scared,
hit this.
or can't see the Bible? It's a rhetorical question, both simple and profound, and it lies at
There it
the
is.
heart of what Communities in Schools has been about for 25 years.
Okay. Can they hear this?
How can children concentrate on their education futures if they're hungry,
Can you hear?
or can't
Barely.
see the blackboard? It's a rhetorical question, both simple and profound, and it lies at the heart of what Communities in Schools has been about for 25 years. As defined to Communities in Schools since 1972, inspiring both the organization and the people who shared its vision.
That's not gonna do it. There we go. Okay. Oops. Locally, we've been around for 23 years. We were incorporated in November 1987. And this is kind of what, if you go to various places and they have communities and schools, this is what you'll see. You'll see that there's a board of directors, there's an executive director, there's a site coordinator, or in our community we call them success coaches. They can be reassigned from another organization. They can be repositioned. For example, let's say that it's somebody from the Department of Mental Health can reposition one of their employees into the school to serve as the site coordinator. Or they can be hired by communities and schools. Ours, the 4 site coordinators we have are all hired. They are employees of our organization. And then you see the school with the student and family needs, bringing in employment services, mentors, tutors, human services, health services, recreation, and business partners. To give you an idea, you notice that volunteers and board members make up about 71% of the workforce of communities and schools. Our paid staff is about 5%. Repositioned staff can also be things like the AmeriCorps Vistas, and community partners are about 22%. On average, across the country, 289 students are served by each CIS paid staff person. That's a huge caseload. The vast majority of human capital comes at no cost to communities and schools, and when this particular data was put together, over 3 million hours of service was donated by 64,000 volunteers across the country. Real quickly, communities and schools has 3 main components: our business operations, and we talked a little bit about the total quality system. Our core functions, planning and implementing our community partnership. That's the first function, is because we can't function on our own in a school. We need lots of partners. Resource development and fundraising. It costs about $70,000 to put a CIS success coach in a school full time. But if you think about it, it costs between $8,000 and $10,000 every time a child is not promoted on time when we have to remediate a student. We serve, one of our success coaches has 53 students that they're working with one-on-one. And so if all 53 were referred to her because they were at risk of not being promoted on time, and she gets them all promoted on time, and they have earned that promotion, think of the amount of money that is saved by that school. So communities and schools pays for itself within the school. Marketing and public relations, managing and developing sites, additional sites, providing and our brokering quality youth programming, and data collection and evaluation. We monitor, later on you'll see level 1 and level 2 services, but we monitor what we do in the school so that we can prove that what we do works. We also can look at it to make sure that it is the right intervention at the right time for the right student. Our CIS operations is a model, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later. CIS cuts across institutional lines to provide holistic services. Again, we bring things together to help the student or to help the school. It prevents the development of parallel systems but creates partnerships. We don't need to have 4 different organizations in a school who may not even know that the other one's in the school doing the same thing. And one of the roles of the success coach is to actually get to know the other partners that are in the school and help coordinate services so that we can serve more students rather than serving less students by more organizations. We try to be supportive to teachers, administrators, and the community at large. We are not there to replace the teachers, to social workers, or anybody else in the school, but to support them. And we address student issues and needs so that teachers are free to teach. If they're trying to get the students to behave, if they're trying to get the students to come to school because they have poor attendance, they're not able to do what they're hired to do, and that is to teach our students. But even more importantly, A dropout's average income is 1/3 less than that of a high school graduate. Female dropouts are 6 times more likely to become teenage mothers than high school graduates. Dropouts are 9 times more likely to end up on welfare than high school graduates. That costs all of us. Dropouts are 7 times more likely to end up in prison than high school graduates. Again, that costs not only our children, but it costs our community. Over the course of their lifetime, a high school dropout costs society $200,000. And in one school, we had a 50% dropout rate here in this community. Collectively, across the country, dropouts cost society an estimated loss of $77 billion each and every year. We think about the economic situation we're in now. Think about what $77 billion would do for our communities and for our country. $71 billion in lost tax revenues, $3 billion that it costs us for welfare and unemployment, and $3 billion for crime prevention every year. Obstacles which students and teachers must contend with on a daily basis, and this is, we have a few more minutes. So, what are some obstacles? You work with students. What are some obstacles that your students are dealing with on a daily basis?
Home problems.
Home problems?
Yeah, the environment at home is bad sometimes.
Okay. What else?
Bullies at the school.
Bullies at the school. Yeah, that's becoming a growing problem. What else?
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Negative peer pressure.
Sometimes administrators and teachers are misguided in their thoughts about the student. They, for whatever reason, sometimes the student's record might be incorrect and it might precede them, so the staff already formulates an idea about that child without giving them a chance.
Right, right. We were talking earlier today in the office about perceptions and students who teachers believe exactly what you're saying, that a student is not going to function and is a behavior problem. That student is going to live up to that expectation. So you're right. What else?
Drugs and physical problems.
Physical problems, drugs, I think I heard. Okay, well, just a few to add to that. Hunger, gangs, alcohol, poverty, bullying was mentioned, violence in the home, in the community, family crises, unemployment. We're seeing a lot of that. Peer pressure, that was mentioned. Low self-esteem, health problems. I also wanted to share with you a little bit about some of the other things, that it doesn't matter what family you come from. It doesn't matter how educated they are, or how wealthy they are, or how many resources there are. There is physiological proof. It's been around for about 10 years, and it's just the last 5 years started to be brought to the front in the media, and that is adolescent brain development. We used to think, and many of you remember the Times article that talked about that those first 3 years, the first 5 years, and so we started lots of early programs. We wanted to make sure our children were in child care centers that were licensed, that were doing some really good things. Well, through a lot of studies by Jay Geet and a number of other experts in the field, they discovered that there is another time frame when the brain is developing, and that's in adolescence. So as parents, we often say, why do they act that way? So this is your brain. The cerebellum, which is this kind of flowery looking piece, deals with the coordination of muscles and physical movement and thinking processes. And it is growing and changing dramatically during the teenage years. The amygdala, that little purple area, that's the brain, the part of the brain that's associated with emotional and gut responses. New imaging studies suggest that teenagers, when asked to interpret emotional information, use this reaction part of the brain rather than the more thinking region of the frontal cortex. They did a study where they showed students various pictures, and the students said, "We think they're mad." They could not read the facial expression correctly. So think about what that means with the students that we're working for. We may be, frustrated, and they may read that we're mad at them. They may read that the teachers are mad at them. They can't put it together at this stage, and that's partially because the brain is changing. The frontal cortex is referred to as the CEO of the brain. It's the part responsible for planning, strategizing, and judgment. It undergoes a huge growth spurt at around the ages of 11 and 12, and imagine it's like a tree. This is also the part that you do the use it or lose it. So you've got this head, and you've got this tree coming out of it. It has lots of branches, but over time, some of those branches are falling off. So if they're not using the particular skill, the particular knowledge, it's falling away. And so that's why it's so important during this period of time that we look to see that children have a variety of opportunities to build upon and to use and to practice, because otherwise that particular branch of the tree may fall away. It's also the part that helps us deal with making good decisions. My mom had a stroke, and it impacted the frontal cortex of her brain. And I would find her sitting in a chair, and she would think it was 6 o'clock at night, and it was 6 o'clock in the daytime, and she had just missed 12 whole hours. She would have a meeting to go to, and she just missed it because it wasn't all going together. So this is the same kind of thing that's happening with our adolescents as that part of their brain is developing. Then this corpus callosum is the cable of nerves that connects the two hemispheres. It's involved with creativity and problem solving, and it too is making huge growth stages during this period. Just a picture, this is time-lapse imaging tracks. It's amazing what we can do with technology today, of a brain from 5 years of age to 20 years of age. And you see that 5-year-old with lots of activity going on as it's developing. But you see that even into 20, there's activity going on in various pieces of our brain. One of the things that I learned when I went to a workshop on brain development is think about some of the things we do. When we get up into your face like this and you're an adolescent, your frontal cortex is not functioning, and so what you were supposed to do was to back up on me a little bit. I didn't warn you. But with a young person, they're acting on emotions, and emotions oftentimes will push back when you do that. And so what do we do if he pushes back at me and I'm the teacher and I've gotten in his face? He gets sent to the principal, and he may get sent out of school because we have zero tolerance. Well, is that really fair to him as an adolescent? Exactly what you're talking about. We need to be aware of these things, or what happens is we set our children up for failure. And you can see it right here.
Is there something where the teachers can take some sort of lesson or something showing that type of example exactly, because we see a lot of that more and more, and even in my daughter's school, I'm active in her school, and there's a huge misunderstanding between the teachers and the students, and I guess because I'm on the outside looking in and I'm observing this, and when you try to address the teachers and explain to them, they think, well, I'm a professional, so I should know. They really don't.
Well, I will tell you that the brain research is relatively new. It's not extremely new because this stuff has been out for about 5 years. But if you think about it, if you went to school to get your teaching degree, in my case it would have been in the early 70s, and I'm still teaching, I don't have the benefit of all that knowledge. I will tell you, PBS did an awesome segment on brain development for adolescents. You can get it on the website. Just go to PBS and put in adolescent brain development, and it actually follows this child, and it talks about why is the child doing this. Well, you know, there are physiological reasons, and what impact does that have on how parents address the children. But it could be just as right to have it in a classroom. Intellectual growth and development. Adolescence, again, is a critical time for brain growth. They're moving from concrete to abstract thinking. They're developing skills in reasoning and problem solving and generalizing, and we as the adults in their life need to help them with that process. This period of brain growth marks the beginning of a person's ability to do problem solving, to think critically, to plan, to control impulses. Again, we talked about the part of the brain that helps control your emotional part, that helps you control impulses. Another thing is a middle school student can generally retain from 5 to 7 bits of information at one time. So we give our children a list of things we want you to do, and we tell you those things. And then we say, were you not listening to me? Well, it may be that we provided too much, and so they got that 5 to 7. Item number 8 comes in, and item number 8 then goes into long-term storage or out. And so one of the keys is when working with especially middle schoolers is not to add too much new information and to take the new information and try to make it build on information they already have. Short-term memory is maintained until it moves into another part of the brain. Again, why they can't remember from one minute to the next. Some stereotypical behavior, engaging in strong, intense interests, often short-lived. I want to join the band. Let's get me a clarinet and I'm going to join the band. And 6 months later, I think I want to play football. I mean, this is typical behavior. Preferring interactions with their peers. How many of you had your children go through adolescence and all of a sudden they didn't want to have anything to do with mom or dad anymore? Preferring active to passive learning. They want to move around. They want to touch things. They become very kinesthetic. They're hungry all the time. They're fidgeting and moving around. They're tired in the morning and wide awake late in the evening. Now, some of this is also physiological. Think about our little 5th and 6th graders. They're really little. They look really young. Now, think about those 9th graders and how much they have grown. Well, think. I don't remember it, but I remember watching my oldest daughter just hurting because she was growing so fast. Her bones were growing. And so it hurt. And she was always hungry because her body was maturing and growing so quickly. And the fidgeting and moving around, it's not that they don't want to listen, but they're hurting. They're trying to find a good position. They just need to move. So we get into the active. The hungry, one of the things that we do is we have snacks in each of our CIS service centers so that a student who's hungry can walk into the service center and say, I'm starving today. And the sleeping, because their bodies are growing so quickly and their brain is developing, teenagers need 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep. Well, think about all the homework they have and all the other things that are going on, especially as they get into 7th and 8th grade when they start having all these extracurricular activities that are taking them out longer. So, and we have start school so early in the morning. So if school starts at 7:15 and they have to get up at 5 o'clock to get ready to get on the bus, what time do they have to go to bed at night? 7:30? To get enough sleep, and that doesn't happen. So we fuss at our kids, and there's Zits is a cartoon series in the paper, in the comic section, and it's got this kid that they're just about having to blast out of bed. He's tired, but it's his body growing, and that's when we do most of our growing, when we're asleep. Is it any wonder that students can't concentrate on schoolwork with all of these things impacting them? So this is the model that Communities in Schools uses. We have a site team at each of our sites. We're in 4 sites. E.L. Wright and Dent in Richland 2, C.A. Johnson, Gibbs in Richland 1, and DJJ. We do an annual needs assessment with all of the staff, or with a number of staff in the school. We also talk to the students, and we also talk to the parents. And what comes out of that is, here's some school-wide needs. Bullying is a school-wide need that we're trying to address. It could be attendance. It could be any of a number of things, but it comes out of that needs assessment. And then we create, by site, an annual site operations plan specific to the students in the school and the school. We connect level 1 services to address school-wide needs. So for bullying, Robert Carlton, who's at the Department of Health and Environmental Control, actually worked with a federal office in Washington, D.C. to create a bullying curriculum for schools. So we bring Robert in to help our success coaches learn what works best with this particular issue in this particular school, and to get resources. We also connect level 2 services. Those are individual services based on individual plans for students with the greatest needs. These students are again referred to us by guidance counselors, by social workers, by the principals, by themselves. We have had some students show up and say that they need help with math, they're failing math. And oftentimes schools are offering tutoring by the teachers. And one of the things I've told the success coach, if the student is not getting the math from the teacher in class, what leads us to believe that the student is going to get the math in tutoring from the same teacher? Because students learn differently. Some are kinesthetics, they have to touch it. Some are auditory, they have to hear it. I'm a visual learner. If I don't see it, it's in one ear and out the other. Yes, ma'am.
A lot of times it's the way they present things. There's something in the paper this morning, and I saw that this is blasting.
It's my favorite one.
But anyway, they've been saying something recently about the way that they presented to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when my child came through Algebra 2, one of those classes, hard, and he really did well in math. But the way the teacher would present it, they would put a model up on the overhead with those things to write on.
Right.
And take it down before the kids had a chance to copy the model and then tell them to do it. Obviously that didn't work. And when they saw entire classes failing, obviously something about that wasn't right.
Right.
And that was it. Putting the model up, and some kids write fast, some write slow, and you take it down before they get a chance to get it, and try to let them figure it out on their own. They couldn't figure it out. So I got him a book, and it was something about algebra, maybe preparing for the SAT or something like that. I just gave it to him, and he sat there and took it and learned algebra by himself.
Mm-hmm.
But now more and more they're talking about the presentation.
Right.
And something about the science and social studies scores came out
Right.
today. What about the way they're presenting these classes? They ought to see it. You wouldn't believe it if you saw it.
Yeah. And there's so much. I served on the social studies curriculum committee to look at social studies curriculum and standards for the state of South Carolina this year. And I was stunned at the amount of information we're expecting students to learn in 1 year. I probably wouldn't do very well because it was a large amount of information. And if you have a class that has some really smart folks who catch on really quickly and some folks who need more time, you can't always make it through all of the stuff. And so then we test them, and maybe they don't have it all. And that's part of what they were talking about today.
The test takes time.
We recruit volunteers to help a lot with the level 2 services, especially as it relates to the tutoring and mentoring. And I told you we have a very sophisticated database that we monitor and adjust services. If it's not working, the classroom you're talking about where so many of the students were failing. If it's not working or we're not seeing progress in the students that we're working with or the school-wide issues that we're dealing with, that means we need to adjust. We need to change. We evaluate our effectiveness at achieving both the school-wide goals that have been set as well as the individual goals. And then we do some annual reporting. We report it to our board of directors. We also report to the principal. We also report to the school. And then we start all over again with a needs assessment. What have we done? Where are they? Are these still needs? Do we need to go back and look at it again for the next year? And that's our model that we use. We bring in partnerships. We've talked a little bit about that. And what we monitor for our students is attendance, academic performance, learning, behavior, and our goal is to get them promoted on time for graduation.
Are you in the school during the day?
We are in the schools during the day. That's correct. We start, some of our success coaches start at 7:30 and go till 4, 5, 6 o'clock at night. We bring in enrichment activities, educational enhancement, parental involvement. We've done some parenting programs because I believe parents really want their children to succeed on the whole. Sometimes they didn't have role models themselves, and they're hungry for what might work. Some tutoring implications. Somebody said once a teacher is a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration, and I thought that was a really good statement. When you're working with children, present limited amounts of new information to accommodate that short-term memory. Provide opportunities for students to process and reinforce the new information and to connect the new information with the previous learning. Provide lessons that are varied with lots of involvement and hands-on activities. We've talked about during this stage of brain development, they want more active learning than passive learning. Provide lessons and activities that require problem solving and critical thinking. Allow students time for a snack. And encourage students to move around before sitting down to work. We used to have recess. We used to have time after lunch. Now they have about 20 minutes to eat their lunch. So we had time to move around. So we've talked about the physiology and our bodies growing and our brains growing, and yet we've taken out some of the things that would help us succeed. Teach students how to study. Establish, model, and practice consistent expectations and rules and routines. If kids know what's expected, ultimately we will get that. Use process charts to detail steps on a long-term project. Use graphic organizers. Use color code materials. I have a younger person who works in our office now, and I have taught him how to color code things so that he doesn't lose anything in the process. How do we know it works?